for today's discussion is this evening is the caste and cultural capital. Let me introduce today's speaker, Rahul Sonpimpade. Rahul is an associate professor in the School of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences at Oro University. His area of teaching include sociology of education, research methodology, and economic sociology. His research interests include social movement, leadership, social inclusion, and sociology of caste. He has a master's degree in social work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and a MPhil in sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. He was awarded the UGC NET JRF in sociology in year 2014. Prior to joining Oro University, he had worked with Institute of Rural Management Anand, Gujarat as associate with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences as a research assistant. Mr. Sonpimpade has a numbers of academic research pieces in the reputed national and international publications such as Economic and Political Weekly, Contemporary Voice of Dalit Sage Journal, etc. He has also authored opinion in international publications like Huffington Post, Al Jazeera, The Print, and NDTV. He is an also active member of the BIRSA, BAPSA, which is Birsa Ambedkar Phule Student Association in JNU. The topic caste and cultural capital is a very important topic. I feel especially when we have spent 2 academic years in the online mode of learning. These modes only serve as a special population having social and cultural capital. On the other hand, this medium has failed us. The Dalit Bahujan and Adivasi students who are generously resource deficit, excluding from their fundamental rights to quality education. Today's topic by Rahul Sonpimpade will give us a more insights on deconstructing this idea of cultural capital. In this domain of knowledge, they make us cultural capital. Their idea to be precise as Abhay Khaka stated. Uh, through us, uh, they enlarge their domain of cultural capital in the in the knowledge market. However, the very same population can detach themselves whenever they want to be or wish to. Their circle are limited to people belonging to their social identity. Their social capital in the market of knowledge shall remain with them, where most of them benefit through us, enriching their social capital, leaving us in torment after they are done with us. Hence, it is very important for us to understand how we became their data and enrich their social capital. Not taking further time, I would like to ask Rahul to enlighten us on the topic caste and social capital.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, first of all, I would like to thank ASA TIS Mumbai for giving me this wonderful opportunity to interact with students and scholars and activists. And I find myself lucky also because the platform I'm sharing, uh, ASA Mumbai, I was there a student in TIS in Dalit and Tribal Social Work. I did my MA. Yes, so as we know, this very topic, caste and cultural capital. Now, as this topic suggests us, that caste produces cultural capital. Okay, and if caste produces cultural capital, so before that, let's have kind of a very brief kind of understanding what do we mean by this very concept of cultural capital. So generally, when we talk about cultural capital, Piers Bourdieu, who actually was a French sociologist, he was the one who developed this idea of cultural capital, and as a way to explain how power in society was transferred and social classes maintained. Now, before Pierre Bourdieu, generally, specifically in the intellectual world and in the academia, whenever we talk about the class or the class power, we generally discuss about Karl Marx and his understanding of class. Okay, so and for Marx, those who have the means of production, those who possess and monopolize the monetary capital, they are the one who we can say have a social position in the society. They have a kind of higher position in the society. Now here Bourdieu is making very new intervention in this understanding, where he's saying it's not just this monetary kind of capital. There also exists something called cultural and social capital. Okay, and this cultural capital is not just about one generation. It's just not about one individual, but this is also about this cultural capital also get reproduced. So for example, when we talk about the class inequality, we also see that how this class inequality get reproduced and produced. Similarly, Bourdieu also see that how this cultural
सर
capital
मैं
get
भी कुछ
produced in the
बोलना
society.
चाहूँ.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sorry, sir, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes, sir, you are audible.
yeah, fine. Okay, so and therefore for Bourdieu, this very concept of cultural capital becomes very important to understand that how culture also plays very important role. For a Marx or for Marxist, culture again becomes a very insignificant part of in a human society, or the stratification in the society. Popularly, they would call it a part of a what Marxists would say a superstructure. Culture they would generally understand as a part of a superstructure, but not as a base. However, Bourdieu is here he's coming very close to also some kind where we can say very close to Ambedkar, where Ambedkar does not just simply understand caste or the culture of a caste just as a part of superstructure, but as a base. Okay, so I'll come to that distinction also. I know there are people who are also from non-academic background, so I won't more emphasize on academic understanding of this very concept, but rather I will try my best to relate it with the caste and how generally in our everyday life this very concept of caste and cultural capital works, and how it impacts the people's life. Okay, but yes, again, just to mention that how Bourdieu, saw this very concept. So Bourdieu talks about kind of three kind of cultural capital. One, he says that there is objective kind of cultural capital, where this kind of cultural capital you see in goods, for example, kind of artworks and all that. And then there's an embodied kind of cultural capital, which you see mostly in language, in so-called manners, and your preference and all of that. Now then there's an institutionalized kind of cultural capital, which is basically like qualification, education, degree, and all of that. And now, but recently also there are studies, on Bourdieu's understanding of cultural capital, where many new understandings are emerging and saying new skills in the market economy, like IT skills, and so-called technical education also plays a very significant part, in the as a part of a cultural capital. Okay, now these are kind of also the experiences which Bourdieu, trying to theorize, in the context of, the Western society, and since he comes from the French society, his experience of class is also rooted into the Western experiences of class inequality. And as we know, the Bourdieu also comes from working class background.
So,
Now, how do we understand this very concept of cultural capital when it comes to India?
so
Okay.
sorry to interrupt. There is a general request. Can you also talk in Hindi as well, English and Hindi?
Oh, Hindi.
That's-
Okay. Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure, sure. I'll try my best to talk in Hindi also.
Thank you.
So this very concept of cultural capital, जब हम बात करते हैं कि कल्चरल कैपिटल है, जनरली हम लोग इस्तेमाल ये शब्द करते हैं इंडिया में कि अरे उनके पास तो कल्चरल कैपिटल है, What do we mean by that? For example, I know I was in Delhi for a really long time. दिल्ली में यदि आप जाते हो तो वहाँ पे दिल्ली हाट करके एक जगह है. नाउ इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग टू अंडरस्टैंड ये एक जगह दिल्ली हाट में जो भी कलाकार होते हैं, दिल्ली हाट का जो निर्माण है कि एक भारत के राजधानी में एक ऐसी जगह होनी चाहिए जहाँ पे भारत के अलग अलग कोने से आने वाले जो आर्टिस्ट है वो अपना काम वहाँ प्रेजेंट कर सके, वहाँ बेच सके. ऐसी एक जगह होनी चाहिए, ऐसा माना गया. अभी ये जो काम है जो अलग अलग कलाकार करते हैं, ये काम कंज्यूम जो करते हैं वो दिल्ली के सबसे एलिट लोग. ओके, तो दिल्ली हाट जो है वो जनरली सिंबल भी है. एक वहां पे जाने वाले लोग एक दिल्ली के एलिट लोग हैं जो अपर क्लास से मोस्टली अपर क्लास. और इंडिया का जो इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटी है वो ये भी बताता है कि इंडिया में मोस्टली अपर क्लास जो है वो अपर क्लास भी है. तो एक अपर क्लास बैकग्राउंड के लोग वहां जाते हैं और उन चीजों को खरीदते हैं. नाउ यू सी दिस, जब हम कहते हैं कि कल्चरल कैपिटल है तो हम ये कहने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ये जो कल्चरल कैपिटल है, जैसे बोर्डियो कहते हैं कि भाई ये तो एक ऑब्जेक्टिव फॉर्म में भी है, एम्बेडेड फॉर्म में भी है और इंस्टीट्यूशनल फॉर्म में भी है. सबसे पहले मैं एक ऑब्जेक्टिव फॉर्म ऑफ कल्चरल कैपिटल को इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अगर देखूं तो इस तरह का जो कल्चरल कैपिटल है वो दिखता है कि एक पर्टिकुलर क्लास है और एक कास्ट है जो एक पर्टिकुलर चीजों को कंज्यूम करता है. जैसे दिल्ली हाट में जाके आप एक कोई सिल्क की साड़ी, शॉल या अलग अलग तरह के प्रोडक्ट्स को कंज्यूम कर सकते हैं. ओनली दे हैव द कैपेसिटी टू कंज्यूम इट, देयरफॉर दे आर डिस्टिंक्ट. एंड वो एक सिंबॉलिक प्रेजेंट भी है पब्लिक लाइफ में कि आई एम वेयरिंग दिस शॉल, आई एम वेयरिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर क्लोथ. ओके, तो वो एक तो now this tells ki it's not just about economy, it's not just about wearing the particular clothes or consuming particular goods, but it's also which goods you are consuming. Okay, so and which goods which goods make this so-called significant unique kind of identity for particular class, and therefore that particular significance, that so-called uniqueness produces kind of capital. ये एक तरह का वो कि हाँ मैं आई एम वेयरिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर ब्रांड, आई एम वेयरिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर सिल्क, है ना. इस तरह का जो एक आइडिया है ये एक कल्चरल कैपिटल का पार्ट है, ये बोर्डियो कहेंगे. फिर हमको पता है कि एक एम्बेडेड काइंड ऑफ होता है. जैसे आई एम फ्रॉम महाराष्ट्र, आई नो आई वाज इन पुणे फॉर माय इंटर्नशिप एंड आई कम फ्रॉम विदर्भा रीजन. एंड व्हेन आई वाज इंटरेक्टिंग विद पीपल देयर, कि जब मैं इंटर्नशिप के दौरान कभी रास्ता भूल गया, किसी को पूछता था रास्ता, तो एक तरह का एक जो लैंग्वेज है कि ठीक है अलग अलग रीजन का अलग अलग लैंग्वेज होता है. बट आई वाज आल्सो वेरी क्यूरियस दैट व्हाई पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी विद इन पुणे आल्सो, फॉर एग्जांपल ब्राह्मण, they use very particular words to just, and these words are very common. So therefore what Bourdieu would argue that this is shade, this particular embodied kind of cultural capital is shade, and the shade among the particular members. तो ब्राह्मण्स की जो लैंग्वेज है, जो मराठी लैंग्वेज है, वो एक दूसरा ब्राह्मण भी बोलता है, उस पर्टिकुलर शब्द का इस्तेमाल दूसरा ब्राह्मण भी करता है. पुणे में ही रहते हुए आप किसी वर्किंग क्लास एरिया में जाते हो तो उस तरह की मराठी आपको नजर नहीं आएंगी या उस तरह की मराठी आप नहीं सुनेंगे जो एक पुणे का ब्राह्मण सुनता है. ये पूरे देश में लागू है वो. तो कहने का मतलब ये है कि यहाँ पे जो एक एम्बोडिड कल्चर है कि उसमें लैंग्वेज आ गया, उसमें आपका सो कॉल्ड मैनरिज्म आ गया. ठीक है, ये एक एम्बोडिड काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल कैपिटल, इसे बोर्डियो कहेंगे. दूसरा है कि एक इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज, कि जिसमें आपकी डिग्री आ गई, जिसमें आपके क्रेडेंशियल्स आ गए. So we know that now in India, if you see the numbers in the university, mostly and so-called premier institutes like TIS, where you are studying, JNU, IITs, IIMs, all these institutes, you see the number of students, those who get admission and those who get a degree from these institutes are mostly upper caste and upper class. Okay, so now these institutions also, and और इस institutions जैसे IIT से आप graduate होते हो, that means you do not just possess a degree, you possess a cultural capital, and that cultural capital allows you to penetrate into the realm of in so-called economic world, जहाँ पे आप मॉनिटरली बेनिफिट ज्यादा होते हो, नो मैटर, नॉट नेसेसरली कि आपको कितना पता होगा, लेकिन ये कि आप यहाँ से पढ़े हो तो इतना पता ही होगा ही, यू नो। सो दिस प्लेज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल। तो ये एक तरह का इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल कैपिटल है, जिसे बोर्डियो कहेंगे। अभी ये एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग है कि नाउ नॉट नेसेसरली द पर्सन हु इज कमिंग फ्रॉम आईआईटी नेसेसरली कि वो अच्छा ही होगा अपने पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट में। हो सकता है कि कोई आईआईटी से ना पढ़ा हो और उसके पास भी उतना स्किल्स होगा। ओके, नाउ माय अंडरस्टैंडिंग व्हेन आई सी दिस, यू नो, दिस काइंड ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग व्हिच बोर्डियो प्रोवाइड्स, हाउ डू वी सी जो अभी का हमारा वर्ल्ड है, खास करके इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इंडिया, हाउ डू वी सी दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑपरेट। So now you see, for example, in India, when we talk about Indian society is based on caste. And when we say caste, what do we say? हम लोग जब जाति की बात करते हैं तो हम क्या कह रहे हैं? Generally, unfortunately, whenever we talk about caste, we only talk about Dalits. But caste, as I always maintain and say that caste is not about Dalits, but caste is mostly about the upper caste and the Brahmins in this country. Because they are the one, you know, who have been preserving the caste system. Okay, तो जब हम कास्ट की बात करते हैं तो हम एक सिस्टम की बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे। वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट जस्ट वन इंडिविजुअल और फॉर दैट मैटर वन कम्युनिटी। सो नाउ व्हेन बोर्डियो सेज कि इकोनॉमिक जो क्लास है, जो अपर क्लास है, वो ये भी कहता है कि उसके पास कल्चरल कैपिटल होता है। But in contrast to Bourdieu's understanding, you see, the Brahmins in India are traditionally do not have what we can say so-called economical asset, जैसे land हो गई, okay, या और कोई economic skill हो गई, वो उनके पास नहीं है। The only thing that they had, the different unique position, and that position is basically that we are the only, you know, people who can access to the God's literature, the God's callings, okay, जो हमारे पास है। और you know, we have a right to you know, make things, you know, sanctify the things. So for example, if you want to live a good life, a sanctified, ritually sanctified life, then we have that power. But technically they never had the power of economic power उस तरीके से in traditional sense, और also एक so called Marxist sense भी देखा जाए तो वो traditionally उनके पास लैंड नहीं है, उनके पास इस तरह का अभी रिसेंट डेवलपमेंट है which are different, but traditionally you see, you know, कि उनके पास लैंड नहीं है। कुछ कुछ जगह पे जहाँ पे उन्होंने एक अपना ट्रेडिशनल काम छोड़ के लैंड एक्वायर किया, तो among Brahmins those kind of communities have kind of been excluded. जैसे if you go to if you go to UP and Bihar, तो Bhumiyar is a caste, okay, which is basically the जो Brahmins है, and there is a contestation. The Bhumiyar claim that they are Brahmins, and the other Brahmin claim that they are not a real Brahmin because they work on the land or they possess the land, whatever. Now you see, with अगर हम इस एनालॉजी के साथ जाते हैं तो, या इस अंडरस्टैंडिंग के साथ जाते हैं तो हमें पता चलता है कि अगर ब्राह्मण के पास ट्रेडिशनली इकोनॉमिकल रिसोर्सेस नहीं रहे, या उसने उसको या जमीन पे काम करना उसने बुरा माना, इट्स नॉट गुड फॉर द ब्राह्मण, ऐसा ब्राह्मण से इट्स अ वर्क ऑफ शूद्रा। ओके, प्रोटेक्ट करना हमारा काम नहीं है, किसी और का काम है। दैट्स व्हाट यू नो द ब्राह्मण ट्रेडिशनली हैव बीन आर्ग्यूड। तो फिर बट यूनिकली द ब्राह्मण्स हैव द सो कॉल्ड हाई काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल कैपिटल इन इंडियन सोसाइटी। व्हाई दिस? तो ये सवाल हमारे सामने आता है कि एक पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी जो ट्रेडिशनली जिसके पास जमीन नहीं है, उसके पास सबसे हाई काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल कैपिटल कैसे आता है? ओके, now here also with Bourdieu, the Weber's understanding and Ambedkar's understanding is very very important. For example, what you know, Weber would say again in opposition to the Marx, that it's not just the economic class in the society which has the high kind of position. For example, when it comes to caste, so it's not just the how much material wealth you have, but how much status you have in the society. So Brahmin becomes a status group. Okay, it's not just the economic group, it is also status group. Okay, जो जिसका status है, जो ritually so called sanctified status है कि हम जो है ऊपर है, और ये हम नहीं कह रहे, ये शास्त्रा कहते हैं, ये भगवान कहते हैं कि हम ऊपर हैं। एंड देयरफॉर ये जो एक कल्चरल कैपिटल है, ये एक थोड़ा वेस्टर्न सोसाइटी से हमें अलग नजर में आता है कि ये ऐसा पर्टिकुलर सेक्शन हमको दिखता है कि जो जिसके पास ट्रेडिशनली सो कॉल्ड मटेरियल वेल्थ उस तरीके से उतनी ज्यादा नहीं रही है कंपेयर टू अदर पीपल। फॉर एग्जांपल हियर, like for example, so called Vaishya or the Baniya community have a more material capital in that, and the land is mostly with the dominant caste. Okay, but still Brahmins has the highest cultural capital. Now, and as I said, in opposition to the Western society, here caste plays very important role, where caste basically, as Ambedkar says, is kind of a unique stratification in that way, where it's not just the economical factors which determine your position, but also the cultural and the so-called, and Ambedkar emphasized on the Brahmanic religion as a factor to produce these positions for the Brahmins. Okay, so therefore it is very important to understand that how this very concept of cultural capital works in the context of Indian society. Now you see, it's also very interesting in the context of India that Brahmins in the contemporary time, and mostly if you can see, mostly around beginning of the 19th century, or with when the Britishers started intervening in the local village economy, Brahmin were the first who started migrating from village to cities. Okay, whether you take the case of North India, and it is mostly prevalent in South and in the western part of Indian society, where Brahmins started leaving the villages and coming to the cities. Now, the cultural capital in so-called larger industrial or so-called capitalist society, Brahmin is the first caste group which made the use of this cultural capital into the form of economical capital. Now here it is vice versa. Whereas in the Western world, those who had more economical capital, they use the economical capital to produce cultural capital and then reproduce it again and again. Here the case is little reverse. Here Brahmins are using their cultural capital, and this cultural capital, where it is coming from? It is coming from the distinct, so-called distinct identity, where Brahmins are different from the rest. Okay, that they are only the people who are allowed to perform the ritual. Now similar kind of people who are becoming the part of larger new industrial economy, and they are basically using this cultural capital in producing the economical capital. So for example, using this very authority that they can only access to the education, and they can only access to teach, to learn, and to reproduce this. They took this opportunity within under the British government, and most of them started taking the English education. Okay, and for that matter, Maharashtra and Bengal is a very interesting case to understand this phenomenon, that how Brahmin started migrating from village to the cities and started using their very unique position under the British government. Okay, and they also started going abroad with the help of British and all of that. Okay, so yeah, now this is again also therefore now this is one factor that you can see now in university also you see mostly the Brahmins and other upper caste. You see, they are if you talk to them, if you talk to any Brahmin student in your university, so you will see that most of them, if not all, have a very long standing journey to tell you that how their forefather, their grandfather, grandmother were educated and all of that. Okay, and therefore, and how now these new Brahmins are using this their cultural capital in the form of new economical capital in new economy. Therefore, when we talk about this new economy, this new liberal economy in the context of India, where most of the Marxists blindly argue on the line of class, that how uh, without talking about caste, they blindly talk about the class in the context of India. But they don't tell you that the people who are reproducing this class inequality, specifically in the larger urban setting, who are these people and how they are able to reproduce this inequality. Okay, now the new reports which have come, and the Indian the class inequality in India, the caste and class inequality in India, the report says the Brahmin and the other upper caste who have more economic resources and more wealth. How this has happened? This has particularly happened with the help of cultural, this very concept of, or this very idea of cultural capital, which Brahmins have and they had in the past, and they still have, this cultural capital, in our time also. Okay, and therefore, when people say, mostly I'm talking about the Marxists, and Marxists say that that the Brahminism without Brahmin. Okay, they generally talk, the Brahmin should not be blamed, the Brahminism should be blamed. But then the question comes in front of us: do Brahminism exist in the isolation, or Brahminism is who is सब? कोई ना कोई तो होगा कि अगर कैपिटलिज्म है तो कैपिटलिज्म को चलाने वाले कुछ लोग हैं, है ना? आप उनको कैपिटलिस्ट कहोगे, आप उनका इतिहास निकालोगे कि ये लोग वेस्टर्न सोसाइटी में, यू कैन से द व्हाइट्स आर द कैपिटलिस्ट और जूस आर द कैपिटलिस्ट, इन यूएस फॉर दैट मैटर। आप एक इतिहास उस कैपिटलिज्म का निकालोगे। फिर इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ब्राह्मणिज्म अगर है तो उसे टिका कौन रहा है? When Ambedkar said that the Brahminism and capitalism are two enemies, mostly Marxists use this and misquote Ambedkar saying that the Brahminism is different, capitalism is different. Rather, what here I am arguing in the context of India, specifically here, yeah, 1 minute, I guess. I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me very clearly?
Yes, sir. You're very clear.
Yes, sir.
Someone making call, or I don't know, some noise is coming. Yeah. So it's fine. So now here, when we say that, when Ambedkar said that the Brahminism and capitalism are two enemies, now just look at the post-independent Indian economy. Can you cannot distinguish between the Brahminism and the capitalism. Okay. Now precisely why I'm saying this, because here the Brahmin is the most, and in that way only caste group which has been successfully, which has successfully used their cultural capital to reproduce the class inequality. Okay. Now you see, and the example that I was giving, whether you see the CEO of most of the foreign companies in India or the corporates in India, whether you see the VCs of the vice chancellors of various both private and government universities. So and other realm, and even unfortunately even Indian civil society run mostly by the Brahmin view, and this civil society mostly takes fund, and this fund, is been, and one should study that how this civil society people who takes fund have created a wealth from this fund, which is supposed to use for the so-called marginalized community in our country. But anyway, the very concept of Brahmanism and capitalism, when we talk about this concept, so what Marxists will tell you, so first that they will say that the Brahmanism is not about Brahmin. But as I said, if capitalism is about capitalists, then how come Brahmanism is not about Brahmin? Brahmanism is very much about Brahmin. And why I'm saying this, not just in the context of one individual, that one individual is Brahmin and therefore he should be blamed. No, this is not what I'm saying. But Brahmin as a community has been successfully, still they are able to produce this class inequality because of this very status of a Brahmin that they have. Now, I give the example of using cultural capital, particularly educational capital, as a and converting this cultural capital into the what we can say, into economic capital. That's what I was trying to say, that this way the two category, Brahminism and capitalism. On the one hand, when the Brahmin claim that the Brahminism can exist without Brahmin, they generally argue that the Brahminism is not about just Brahmin, it's about everyone, because everyone tries to emulate or or have this tendency of practicing Brahminism. But what does it mean? It only means that there's a system in which the Brahmins have again and again produced this so-called popular cultural realm, where having particular kind of higher caste kind of tendency or behavior is been rewarded by the Brahmins. Okay. Now, and there's a, for example, you see in sociology, when we talk about this very concept of Sanskritization by Srinivas, so he says that he sees this emulation or this imitation by lower caste imitation of upper caste by lower caste. He sees as a part, process of social change, and he calls it a Sanskritization. And I don't just see it is just simply a process of Sanskritization. Rather, I see it's a process of that how one community wants to acquire the power. So, for example, because it's a Brahmin who has said this particular act and particular thing is powerful. For example, तिलक लगाने से you कि आप अच्छे बन जाते हो, आप वेज खाना खाने से वो प्योर बन जाते हो. Who said this? Who created this realm? It's a Brahmin who created this. Okay, and now still they are doing it. So it's not about just Sanskritization, and it's not social change या social mobility जो खाली Sanskritization से नहीं आया है. There are many processes. For example, in religious conversion from lower caste, to another religion, mostly in Islam, in Buddhism, and in Christianity, has been a very constant, what we can say, the process for social mobility and social change. And one can also talk about that, at very big length. But now here, I'm trying to tell you that Brahminism cannot sustain without Brahmin. Precisely because in the larger cultural realm, it's a Brahmin who tries to always prove that how he is a distinct from the other, rest of the people. And this claim has always, whether you read Tilak, whether you read Nehru, or whether you read any, the Brahmin traditionally who have been part of, maintaining these caste inequalities, they always made, argued that how Brahmin is distinct from the other rest of the community. Okay, so although they would say that we are Hindus now, most they calling themselves Hindu is also not does not have even very long history. Brahmin calling themselves a Hindu is also has it's also kind of recent in the sense of history, because Brahmin generally would call themselves, always resist themselves to be the part of what to the larger community. Now therefore I say Brahminism cannot exist without Brahmin. And one again argument, the next argument I'm trying to make here, that in India the Brahmins are the one, and Brahmins character, as what Borde would say, that their attributes exhibit, or their attributes are more aligned or get aligned towards the so-called this new liberal economy. Because in the new liberal economy, the new liberal economy is centered around producing or claiming that there is something unique. Okay, therefore they always say we give the unique experience. Okay, and there is this competition. Okay, there is this competition that every individual in this economy tries to prove that how he or she is unique from the rest of the people. Whether it's you can study through fashion, you can study by the pattern of consumption, and as Borde would say, there is a very tiny minority, very tiny ruling class minority which is able to consume, which is so-called unique. Now in India, Brahmins traditionally are the one community which is been proving again and again that they are unique from rest of the people. Therefore, this concept of concept with which new liberal economy functions, that some we produce or we provide a unique experience to our consumer, is basically goes more with the Brahmins. Brahmins has this traditional claim that they are unique and their consumption is unique, their existence is unique. Okay, and therefore I say capitalism or the new liberal economy and the Brahmin and the Brahmanism are not too separate, but they have become one. They have become one, and specifically in the context of India. Maybe one can understand it with little unique lens, because it is situated in the caste. But at larger level, if you see Brahminism, new liberalism, and capitalism are kind of have been intertwined in the Indian society. So this is one argument that I was trying to make. Now here also I want to say that now this is kind of this new this Brahminism or this new liberalism one can understand through so-called urban centric economy, or or by studying so-called metropolitan cities. But then how do you understand the village society? Because Brahmins have left the villages, uh, except UP or some other part of North India. If you see largely, the Brahmins have left the cities, left the villages, and they're mostly now migrated to cities. They're well settled in cities now. Okay, so if they have left the villages, then who are there who are ruling the village? Who are the one who has this cultural capital? So now, just for example, if you study Punjab, so in Punjab, there's a land owning caste, Jat, who basically have controls and have monopolized, most of the agricultural land in Punjab. Now, the second, third argument which I'm trying to make here, there is, you know, you can say the larger meta kind of cultural capital that you have, which mostly operates in the so-called new modern spaces like in universities and also in bureaucracy and some other places in market economy. But then there is also the kind of subculture that we have, and I'm not calling it subculture by the numbers, but by its presence. So, for example, Punjab. So Punjab is so-called agriculture. They have an agricultural economy. In that agricultural economy, particular caste owns the land, and if because they owns the land, they also have their culture which is being celebrated. Okay. Now, and this cases which comes in front of us that कि दलित दूल्हे को घोड़ी पे नहीं चढ़ने दिया और चढ़ा घोड़ी पे तो उन्हें मार दिया गया. This case is mostly comes from Rajasthan, from UP, from Bihar, and from mostly from other part of North India, where these practices has been mostly understood as a practices of the Jamindar or so-called Raj. Okay. Now there is a claim by this land owning caste, by even Jats or even by some other so-called middle caste people. They always have this claim to prove that they are Kshatriya. And now if I have to prove that I am a Kshatriya, how do I prove that? I prove by inflicting violence, because Kshatriya means ruling someone. But how do you rule? You do not rule by creating so-called consent that I want to rule you, please accept me. No, not like that. You show the power. Like in Maharashtra, many people who may be attending this meeting, I am sure that there are many people who are from Maharashtra. The Marathas or the Kunbi Marathas in villages, in popular language, in Marx system, you can call them peasant, and that's what the Marxist scholar called them a peasant. But they were never a peasant, although they claim themselves a Raja. They call themselves Raja. We are Raje. There is this terminology which has been particularly used for them, Raji. Now this peasant is basically, his claim is to a king. Now if he has to prove that he is a king, how does he prove? He proves that he is a king by inflicting violence on landless laborers, and mostly those landless laborers are Dalits, and they thrive in most of the part of the India and some lower OBC community. Now, therefore, you have to understand, and there is this culture. There is this culture of a caste where you see the absence of the Brahmin, where Brahmin is not present anymore, but the land owning caste is present, and their culture is basically the culture which is mostly revolves around proving themselves as a Kshatriya. Okay, and this proving, or or having this kind of this so-called cultural traits, what they claim, becomes a part of cultural capital in the in the rural society. Therefore, Dalit cannot keep mustache. Dalit man cannot. Dalit women cannot take a good education. She cannot wear a very so-called good clothes and all of that. Okay. Now this is kind of the cultural capital that we have in the rural society, which I guess is very important to understand. Okay. So there in this rural India, this kind of cultural capital plays very important role. Okay, and in urban India, the Brahmin is the one who is basically still controlling. So now see, now we also are witnessing the new kind of cultural capital, which is again the kind of imitation of the Western society, but very much rooted into the caste. Now you see this entire scene of, now recently on Twitter there was a campaign against this stand-up comedians and the film actor and actress who used made fun of Mayawati and many other Dalits. So there is this tendency that this stand-up comedy, most of these people crack a joke on reservation. Okay, and they find it cool. Now the people who are consuming that kind of act, you know, they generate a laugh. It generates a laugh in their mind. For me, or for maybe many other people who come from the marginalized background, they may not find it, amusing. They might find it humiliating for them. Okay, now how can you say that? So you see this. So there is this shade culture now in the new urban economy. There is this shade culture where this new upper caste kids who has the English convent education, who are coming studying abroad and coming here in India, have very different dialect, emulating and imitating the Western white people here, but rooted mostly into the caste. Okay, their privilege is mostly rooted into the caste stuff. Very interestingly, the upper middle, middle class or upper middle class Dalits also want to do that. They also want to participate, but there is a but there is a this this what we can say condition. And what is that condition? Either you accept us, you accept our culture, then only you can become the part. And that acceptance is not simply the acceptance. For example, I was watching this Dalit guy who was doing the stand-up comedy, and the audience he was addressing mostly upper caste, upper class, and that audience found out his jokes quite laughable and funny. I did not find it funny. I did not laugh at that. Not necessarily that that we all the time are in the angry position or sad. No, we also laugh, but on different stuff, which may be neutral or which may not hurt us. Okay. Now, therefore, I say there is this condition for this new Dalit, upper middle class Dalit, who also want to make their presence, but there is a condition. Either you humiliate the other Dalit, or but yes, this basically humiliating your other Dalit, and therefore you can claim now you are a part of it. Okay, so so in today's time where we mostly trying to say, okay, right wing is there, fascism is there, but this everyday fascism which is happening in urban places does not necessarily come from so-called right wing. Okay, this also comes from the so-called progressives and so-called these urban English speaking elites, which basically have created very thick and very strong cultural capital in the urban spaces, where which naturally also comes against Dalits. So you see a feminist, upper caste feminist, stand-up comedian. There was a feminist, who to whom NDTV covered for a really long time, very progressive kind of feminist. Now I think she has deleted her video from YouTube. But when I saw that video, she is making fun of Mayawati, basically commenting that how she is the masculine, okay, and making her face so-called feminist joke. So feminist, Marxist, progressive, all strands of people in the urban setting, they found Mayawati and many other Dalits as you know, you know, uh, you know, uh, the source of making or creating jokes. Okay, and therefore I am saying this new cultural capital, which is shaping the so-called new urban kids, it also needs to be understood in this part. The last but very important, which I'll speak and then I'll rest my talk here. That but then is it like, for example, Bourdieu says that ruling class produces their own cultural capital, and it is shared among them, and always keep or exclude the rest of the people, mostly working class. But will it be like this? Are we just going to say, okay, it is Ambedkar actually believed in creating what we can say, uh, if in the popular language I can say the counter culture. And if he's talking about the counter culture, he's also talking about the counter cultural capital and this new world, which generally he talks in the sense of Prabhuddha Bharat. Okay, where and therefore for Ambedkar, religious conversions becomes very important. Although there were many so-called polite upper caste who requested Ambedkar not to convert into, including Gandhi for that matter, who were threatened of Ambedkar's decision to convert into Buddhism. Okay, so so why then this Ambedkar conversion is very important in the today's time of cultural capital? Because here Ambedkar is making very important decision where he's saying that I'm simply because if I'm in this system, where by nature, anyhow, the ruling classes and Indian context, Brahmins and other Savarna are going to get benefit from this very structure. So, अगर आप इस स्ट्रक्चर का पार्ट हो तो आप कितना भी दौड़ोगे आप लास्ट ही आओगे. That is what caste does to the lower caste in Indian society. आप कितना भी प्रयास करो आप उस रेस में हमेशा पीछे ही आओगे. But Ambedkar did that. He said that we are not part of it only now. We have our own different world only. So let's create a different world, which is where the hierarchy is not about creating a status. Maybe there will be hierarchy, but that hierarchy is very, very functional. Okay, and when I'm saying that hierarchy is very functional, this hierarchy not necessarily is going to create a class which can call itself as a ruling class, but rather the group of people or the class which has a larger claim of equality against the inequality. Okay, therefore against the upper caste, and therefore for Ambedkar, this Buddhism is not simply just for many who many criticize even Ambedkar's, many intellectuals still criticize Ambedkar's stance of conversion, that many believe that Ambedkar act of conversion basically have reduces the Dalits' potential to bring the revolution. Many believe that Ambedkar act of converting it into Buddhism have they say that have made the Dalits passive kind of a citizen or the passive participant in Indian democracy. However, you see the in the realm of cultural capital, if you look at through this lens, the Ambedkar entire stand on the conversion, then it's become very important, because here where Ambedkar is finding there is no scope to mobile yourself, or even you try to get some kind of mobility, you will be never equal. You will be always, as I said, आप रेस में हमेशा पीछे ही रहोगे, क्योंकि वो रेस का मापदंड और उस रेस जो nature है that of that particular competition as such, where you will be always the last in the last. Therefore, Ambedkar took this decision to basically creating a new world, which he called, as I said, Prabuddha Bharat. And in this Prabuddha Bharat, the culture becomes very important, where Bourdieu says the mannerism. And this particular mannerism does not exist, in the Brahmin, or what you can say, within the Brahminic religion, which is now been known popularly as Hinduism. Now Ambedkar here is talking about different kind of mannerism. So if you read critically his this oaths, धर्म परिवर्तन करते समय बाबा साहब ने जो प्रतिज्ञा पढ़ी और जो प्रतिज्ञा दी, they are not simply the religious religious oaths or the religious kind of pratijna. They are rather more towards creating a new world, where he's saying that I will not believe in Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. I will not do this, I will not do that. Okay, so these commands also gives us space to see that how Ambedkar wanted to create a new world, where now you don't have to necessarily compete, or become the last contender, but rather here you yourself has an equal space, okay, to create your own world, which is distinct from the Brahmins and the Savarnas, which is distinct from the very ideas of this hierarchy, and creating therefore your own cultural capital. Okay, and this capital then you use it for your own mobility. Okay, so I understand Ambedkar, although I can talk a little bit more on that, but now I'll rest my talk here, and I'll allow the participant to give their input and further this discussion. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you for this brilliant talk, Rahul. It was just outstanding in terms of the theorization of the cultural hegemony and the domination in the society.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about the debate around Brahminical notion of culture and Baba Sahib's debate or argument about the culture. Baba Sahib just introduced the class with one class is untouchable, rest is another class, two classes only, touchables and untouchables. Whereas Brahminical notion of culture is that Brahmin itself is one class and rest of others are another class.
Yeah.
And then the another argument about the economic based class, for instance, what Marxist or materialistic approach has been talking about, that haves and haves not, or those who have economic power, they are upper class, and those who don't have, they are a lower class. Now, how do you see this, three dimension of class, particularly when we are looking about the caste or the caste perspective? One of the best argument which I found during this talk, and there are many, but one is very important, which you categorically said that Brahmins, though they are not economically powerful, but they consider themselves higher class, which is contradictory to what this Marxist talks about, what this
Yeah.
caste, class-based so-called materialistic class debate argument or a notion of class has been popularized in the international platform, including in India too, which is just, you are just saying that this is just invalid, which is absolutely right there.
Yeah.
But when we come on the try to bring this argument on one page, which has been come from a Brahmin or a Brahminical perspective, second come from a materialistic perspective, and third and very important for us is come from a Baba Sahib's perspective, that touchables and untouchables. There are only two classes, touchables and untouchables, even today, contemporary time too, when we read Baba Sahib's argument about this. Now, how you elaborate on these things, because Baba Sahib was very much in favor of economic capital too. Therefore, Baba Sahib was talking about the migration from rural to urban, the migration from lower class to upper class in terms of economic term, which I'm trying to refer those terms here. So how you see these three arguments, and how you debate around this? Rest of your talk was brilliant, and I'm just trying to have some more discussion on these three concepts.
Yeah. No, this is half of your like things you already have answered many things. I would just add into this in your question that you see, as I said, in the contemporary time, you see that, as I said, the Brahmins are the one who, if you see their population, they are, and you see the urban population through the caste list, you will see that in villages you will hardly find the Brahmins now, except I said UP and Uttarakhand for that matter. They mostly have migrated to cities and the towns. So now, in the villages, now there is this very harsh kind of culture, which we can directly relate it to the caste, so-called caste norm, the everyday caste norm, which, as I said, the most dominant caste like Marathas and the other middle caste, which comes under the OBC category also. And for example, Jat for that matter, dominant caste, and then there is a Saini for that matter in Punjab. So now here they are the one who are claiming that they're Kshatriyas. Therefore, there is a kind of a subculture, which is very close to what we can say caste culture, where they claim themselves Kshatriya, and therefore to prove that they're Kshatriya, they inflict violence on them, and they have created kind of this cultural asset, what we can say कि हम ऐसे रहते हैं, हम लोग बुलेट चलाते हैं, हम लोग लाइक घोड़ी पे आप नहीं चढ़ सकते, हम ही चढ़ सकते हैं, हम ही व्हाइट कपड़े पहन के चौक में खड़े रह सकते हैं, हम ही खुद को राजे कह सकते हैं. All of this can be the part of cultural capital in the context of a rural society, but when it comes to earlier, when the Brahmins were so-called part of the village structure, village society, they had this cultural capital, as I said, that we are distinct from other. We do not produce anything, therefore we are pure. The notion of purity is also very interesting in the context of India, where Brahmin is claiming again and again that I am pure because I don't work. Okay, in the Western world, the history of capital is little different. No class, I don't see any class who is claiming that we are pure because we don't work. Okay, we don't. Here the Brahmins have this unique claim that we are pure because we do not work. We only pass kind of, we are Bhu Devta. We have authority on the Shastra, all of that. Now the similar class, the similar caste is shifting to the urban areas and using their traditional cultural capital in creating the economical capital. Now, this very economical capital, as Bordi would argue, also survives or get protection from creating the larger cultural realm. And therefore, I'm saying, what is this larger cultural realm which is operating in so-called new urban India or the new so-called modern urban India? What is this new culture? So this new culture you find has on the one hand, some imitation from the Western world, but this imitation also been rooted into the caste world. And therefore, I'm saying Brahmin have very successfully first used their Brahmin status as a part of a cultural capital, have created the economic wealth. And with this economic, to sustain this economic wealth, they have also created very successfully the caste, the culture in the urban society, which has the roots, of a class. For example, you go to Mumbai, you go to Dadar, and you see the Shuddha Shakahari. Now how come this Shakahari become the Shuddha? In Dadar, in VT, in Delhi also you find. How come this Shakahari become the Shuddha? ये किसका कल्चर है? क्या कोड़ी लोग का कल्चर है? जो फिशिंग कम्युनिटी, जिसका नेचर है, जो समंदर के पास रहा, जो मछुआरा है, जिसने मछली निकाल के खाई, उसका कल्चर वेज खाने का नहीं हो सकता है। या जो बोरीवली के इसके पास रह रहा है, जो आदिवासी है या जो वर्किंग क्लास है, उसका कल्चर। देयरफॉर व्हाट ब्राह्मण हैज बीन वेरी सक्सेसफुली डन दैट कि शाकाहारी मींस शुद्ध। तो ये जो है अर्बन सोसाइटी में, ये ब्राह्मण हैज first, as I'm saying, in urban places they have used the traditional culture as to convert into economical capital, and now to protect that economical capital, they have created the new cultural capital in urban society. I don't know if I have answered your question, Nitin, because half of the thing you yourself have answered in that question. I'm just adding something. I don't know. Yeah.
No, it was perfect, Rahul.
Yeah.
Just little bit, if you could just throw some light on the untouchables and touchables classes, which Baba Sahib has talked about, and contemporary time in terms
No, that's what I
of
said.
economy.
That's what I said, Nitin. Now, for example, when Brahmin was very much part of the village society, so that time you see there you see the so-called very clear kind of hierarchy where Brahmin is there, and then there's a so-called Kshatriya, Vaishya, whatever, like that. But now you have a society, and untouchable is untouchable for everyone. Untouchable is not just untouchable for the Brahmin, but is untouchable even for the so-called, the lower OBC is what we can say today. Is untouchable for everyone. But now that has changed. That has changed. In a sense, I'm saying that the very traditional caste norm, on the one hand, has just somehow been very much part of village society. And since the Brahmin is not there, Brahmin has left the village. Now in the urban society, you see the new kind of caste culture which Brahmin has created. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, untouchable is untouchable for everyone, not just for the Brahmin, but for everyone. And in the absence of Brahmin, as I said, this middle caste, this dominant caste, have become kind of, have this what we can say the cultural capital. As I said, you can study Jat, you can study Kamma, you can study Reddis, you can study Marathas, and elsewhere also, like in different region you have the different dominant caste which also claims their authority with some kind of cultural capital. Yeah.
Hi Rahul, thank you for this very brilliant talk and touching upon the various aspects of how cultural capital kind of affects the thing. Like as we know, I mean, in academia, like initially, as in when the talk started, like that how gaining knowledge from the marginalized have also kind of have let the Brahmins or the upper caste gain the kind of cultural capital, which has been very successfully used for their careers and maintaining. I don't know the hegemony. We know that in universities it happens,
Yeah.
So. I just have a query, as in, and they, as you said, they make this cultural capital as a hegemonic thing, to be accepted by all, as you said from the thing of Sanskritization and all that. So I mean, being a researcher or a student, who is just new, doesn't know all these kind of things which go on in the academia and the very I mean, when I came, when in JNU, I mean, you are, made to, stuck in a research, where you kind of have to deliberately study your own community, in the name of big terms like feminism, patriarchy, and tend to be located within your own community. So I'm thinking, I mean, and as we have also just read recently about what happened in GB Panth, Badri Narayan kind of, just saying this, we know that. So, I mean, and in Badrin, in this institution, I don't know if many know that there is a Dalit Resource Center also, in which what he does is to, where all the Brahmin scholars, they collect the data from the nearby villages, from the Dalits and all that. And Badri has written this book on the Mayavati and all that, he's collecting that how she came to power, basically gathering all the information, the booklets and pamphlet, he gathered from the villages and wrote a book and all that. And, basically collecting the data. I mean, we are the data. Dalits are the
Yeah.
data. So,
Yeah.
my question is like, that how do we control to become a part of this cultural capital, being a data? How do we stop it? I mean, through research, which we do all the time, and
Yeah.
add to the power. How do we do that?
Yeah.
How do students,
Yeah.
it is so problematic. I mean,
Uh,
really, I mean, in the time of giving, you job or something, or recommendation, anything, we are nowhere. But for data,
Yeah.
we have to be always available. And also there is a thing that, the data that they collect from, is from the very marginalized section, which do not have the idea of anything at all, of the power
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
In the research, the question of ethics, I don't know. Yeah. How do we
Yeah.
stop our students, to gain this consciousness, that don't become a part of it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you see, as you say, like, academia, academia itself, and Bourdieu has emphasized more on that, on cultural capital and education. And I guess if one has to really understand, or, it's so easy for anyone from our generation, or for anyone who is not even part of academia, to just simply see that what Bourdieu is saying is so easy and can relate in the context of India. And Indian academia is a very stark case of it, where, you have a group of people, as you say, and this very idea of research methodology, okay, that what methodology you have used, okay, that, to produce this knowledge. And if you're not have used this particular methodology, therefore your knowledge is not authentic enough. Therefore you're not scholar enough to claim something. Okay. Can you hear me, Subhi?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, in the present time, academia is a place where you see cultural capital operating and reproducing inequality. Very, very, very funnily, in Indian context, in popular realm, when we talk about Indian politics, generally people we held, or we hold the politician some kind of responsible for the marginalized condition of marginalized, the poor condition of the marginalized.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult for you just to hold the academician to, for the, the marginalized condition of the poor in this country. Rather, you can slap the politician sometime when he comes to promote for you. You may have that power, or you can harshly talk to him. Here, the person is sitting on your knowledge, and you cannot say anything. Rather, you have to go to that person.
Yeah.
And therefore, the academia carries more impunity and has less democracy. All politician in the politics, at least you have some kind of democracy, where every party, BJP, Congress, left, right, every party will some or other time at least feel some compulsion to talk about you, or to have some kind of guilt. Here, the academia is completely impune from the guilt. Academia is completely impune from any democratic principle. Where and how do they do that? Again, what even Bourdieu would say, that, it's not important that they have a capital. What is the important question is basically why that particular capital is a capital. Okay. And traditionally, how Brahmins have said particular thing is a capital. Now in the academia, the same upper caste, we using the so-called modern language or modern dialectic, they are saying this particular methodology is more sanctioned. My way is more sanctioned than yours. Okay. And therefore, I believe that the Indian academia is a very stark case of cultural capital. And there is no other way, as I said, there is no other way saying कि हम लोग भी academies पे जाके academia को बदलेंगे. It can, this is not possible. I think आप हमेशा आपके बीच में एक दो लोग होंगे जो आगे बढ़ेंगे, because inequality बहुत ज्यादा है. Inequality थोड़ी बहुत नहीं है कि आपके पास economical capital है तो आप कुछ ये कर देंगे. Inequality बहुत ज्यादा है. इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि rather to basically completely, there is no other way to boycott the Brahmin and the Brahmin academia. There is no other way. You cannot be the part of it and can reform it. You can, and Ambedkar also said many times, like, you cannot simply, आप हमेशा इस दौड़ में सबसे लास्ट ही होगे. आप में से एक दो लोग होंगे जिसको वो दिखाने के लिए ये करेंगे, लेकिन इस दौड़ में आप हमेशा आगे होंगे. Therefore, I always believe that creating own world, creating the own knowledge, creating own methodology is very, very important. And that's what Ambedkar did. I was reading the conversation between Ambedkar, Nehru, and Radhakrishnan, where Ambedkar was asking some help from Nehru to publish Buddha and his Dhamma. Nehru simply refused, and Radhakrishnan also refused. I'm saying, it's not a new, it's not a new that your knowledge has, that that your knowledge will be कि वो लोग उसको रोकेंगे. I'm saying that, there is no other way. You have to create your own world, and and this academia, Indian academia, you know, it's basically, kind of, ये बहुत ही मुगलता होगा हमारा कि हम इसमें जाए और इसको बदले. इस completely impossible. एक दो लोग करेंगे जो आपको लगेगा, but they will also at the end will become a Dalit thinker. They will be called as a tribal thinker. They will be called as a Muslim thinker. Okay, so वो inequality at the end will be produced in that. So you have to completely boycott it by creating your own institution, own methodology, own ways, which we know now. No matter what you say, maybe this is a, one can say, lame example, but I can tell you the landless laborer knows more than anyone else कि किस जमीन पे कौन सी किस तरह की जमीन पे कौन सा पेड़ लग सकता है, कौन सा धान बो सकते हैं, कौन सा नहीं. And if this is not scientific, this is not science, and only what Brahmins tells you in the university कि आप इस तरह का methodology इस्तेमाल करके लोगों के बारे में बात कर सकते हो, then this is how the new, you can say the so-called new knowledge system is creating the hegemony. So academia is more hegemonic than the Indian politics. That's what basically, and you don't have any other way, but to boycott it completely.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you.
Yeah.
Purna, can you go next?
Hi, Rahul. Good to see you
Yeah,
after a
hi.
long time.
Yeah,
Uh,
Purnu. Yeah.
Yeah, my question was kind of asked in the previous question, so maybe I'll ask a slightly different question. I mean, kind of related question. Your idea of neoliberal, economy and this experience of uniqueness was quite interesting. I liked it a lot. My question is kind of related to the whole, cultural capital is something, and we, the previous, the one, is it? Yeah, I mean, in the previous question, someone asked about, I mean, gave the example
Yeah.
of this GB Pant and so on. So,
Yeah.
and the whole idea of network capital, how network capital also kind of functions within the cultural capital. Whom do you know? I mean, who does, who writes your SOP, who introduces this,
Yeah.
and so on. So, I mean, within this neoliberal economy and in this uniqueness of experience, how does the role of state come about? I mean, the government and state funded for, I mean, how does state, I mean, if culture is something which is part of superstructure and kind of distance from politics and so on, and base and economy and so on, in contemporary context, the role of state is kind of very important, I think, because you have all this
Yeah.
kind of neoliberal kind of sponsored institutions in India,
Yeah.
the top of the tree, if you like. All the elites go there and study in all these elite institutions, private institutions, which kind of guarantee you a degree and guarantee you to give a unique experience. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, although it's ironical that they claim themselves to be international and world universities, while the majority of the Indian population, they kind of go to government schools, government institutions. So in
Yeah.
a way, by withdrawing the government or the state, by withdrawing its role from the public funded institutions, it kind of the neoliberal economy, you kind of touched upon it, but I'm interested in the role of state now, how state is
Yeah.
withdrawing responsibility from
Yeah.
from public funded institutions and so on. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you, Purna, for this question. And this also makes the Indian case very interesting. For example, when we, as you said, this network, and there are many studies also have been done on that, how networks plays, the social network is a part of a social capital, and who else knows better than the Indian Dalit, specifically the educated Dalit who struggles to get a job or some degree. They are the, I guess they know much better than anyone else in the India. Either you will have to become some part, for example, like you'll have to either submit all your authority to someone, then only you can get something like that. But most of the things that here, the conventional notion, uh, uh, that the state plays a kind of an antagonistic role. For example, for Marxists, the so-called new liberal or so-called modern state is basically, in necessarily stand in a opposition to so-called the proletariat uh, of any nation. However, in the context of India, it's rather state, if not completely, so relatively is more secular and less casteist than the Indian academia or the Indian upper caste or the civil society for that matter. So you see, for example, if I take the GB Panth as a case, or JNU for that matter, or IIT for that matter, as a case of to understand the role of state and the society. Here, the state is saying that okay, you have a reservation norms to follow, therefore you have to, come up with a special notification to include these marginalized people in your university or in your institute. However, the society, which is again the Brahminical society, the Brahmins, and when I'm saying Brahminical society, the Brahmins are very much part of it. This myth that then the academia started creating, that Brahminism is can sustain without Brahmin, is just another another act of saying that, like for example, can one can say that like capitalism is not without capitalism. Does it survive? No, Brahminism survives very much because the Brahmin is there. And like GB Panth Institute, JNU or IIT, we see that here the state is saying you have to implement the reservation, and they're reluctant. They are producing some logic, some weird logic not to implement, this reservation. So and here a very interesting argument that they give that okay, this is not found suitable. Okay, and therefore I see this dichotomy, which or what the Marxists call dialectic. So this dialectic doesn't work here. Here, I mean, similarly in the atrocity cases, where the upper caste says, don't go and complain because गांव का नाम खराब होगा, the village name will be defamed. Therefore, let's do one thing कि गांव में settlement करते हैं. I give you something or you take something or या नहीं माने तो they will use the violence. In most of the atrocity cases, this is nature. So, but whatever some kind of fear that they have is because of the so-called modern state. Therefore, I cannot say the state is completely emancipatory here, but state is more liberatory, more progressive than the society in our country. Okay, and therefore this, as I said, the Indian academia in that way is more casteist, more Brahminical than what they say the fascist party, the BJP. And this is I'm saying very categorically. People can say whatever, but at least BJP is compelled to have a Dalit as a president. Okay, but the Indian academia like JNU or many other central government institute and the university, they don't even feel a small compulsion to have a Dalit as their vice or Dalit as a professor. How do you understand this? Okay, and this basically just makes the reality very complicated. Complicate for other people, but complicate maybe not for us, because we are seeing it, we are witnessing it. It may be complicated for the university scholar who are reading Guha, who are reading Srinivas, who are reading some other upper caste scholar. For them, it may be complicated. For us, this is, I don't see the complication. It's so clear. The state at least have some space, gives some space to negotiate, but the political parties give some space to negotiate. But your institutions, so-called civil society institutions, your universities, they don't give you any space to negotiate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do we have time for a couple of more questions?
Yeah, I can answer.
Okay. So there's a question on chat by Deepti. It says, what do you feel about Savarna feminist women using Ambedkarite framework to study caste among Savarna women? Because like you said, caste is not just about Dalits. Rather, Savarnas are more closely tied to caste. But would such a study, critical study of Savarnas, be another exercise in centralizing Savarna's idea and gain cultural capital for the research, or will it be a necessary addition to the broader anti-caste movement?
No, I don't think that it will be contribution to anti-caste movement, but of course that will be a very kind of helpful document, at least for the urban educated Dalits who constantly contests to get some kind of acceptance from the upper caste. For them, it might be a very useful document to see or know, that that this is how the caste function, because they are kind of very much confused kind of category. They don't know what to do. So when they go to university, they also take some Western kind of concept and want to theorize a Dalit experience, and they write some nonsensical books and all that literature. So I get, because of poor Dalit is so clear. I know that I come from the area which the moment I tell to other people in maybe in West Nagpur, Pachim Nagpur, all of that, from where this Devendra Fadnavis and all these people come from, and even the progressive and the Marxist, many, वो जहाँ से वो लोग आते हैं, they immediately know कि ये बंदा ये schedule caste है, जयभीम वाला है. So for me, it's not my people, and for me, it's not that useful. You take it, you write, don't write, वो हमको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता उसका. But those middle class, upper middle class Dalits, for them it will be more useful, because they are the one who are becoming really, obstacle for our movement to bring any change within the university and outside the university. Okay, they don't. So for them, because because they don't, they are the one now who are able to acquire the language, who are able to theorize, so-called theorize. For them, it will be useful. For larger anti-caste movement, I don't know, because as I said, for us it is so clear. I know मेरे neighbor को पता है कि ये महार है. गांव में जाऊंगा तो वो उसको पता है कि ये महार का लड़का है. तो for my mom, she knew she was a daughter of this mill worker. उसके नेबर कुन भी थे. वो मेरी माँ बताती कि वहां पे खेलते खेलते गलती से भी गए तो वो चिल्लाते थे, मारते थे, और वो पानी छिड़कते थे फिर वो अपने आंगन में. तो फॉर हर इट वाज सो क्लियर कि सबको पता है कौन क्या है. This any kind of knowledge which Prakash wants to produce through feminist lens, or through taking any other concept, gender or a class or other concept, ये उनके इस्तेमाल के लिए ज्यादा बेहतर होगा. Okay, now for Konkana Singh Sharma, it will be revealing document for us. Any Dalit writing, उसका experience या कोई upper caste लिख रहा है वो हमको, for larger Dalits, I don't think that is useful. But yeah, one can do that. Who can stop upper caste doing anything? They can.
Thank you, sir. Ankush, can you go next?
Okay, thank you, Chitra. Jai Bhim, Rahul Bhau. Thank
Jai
you for
Bhim.
this brilliant speech. So my question is, how can we build our own culture capital?
Yeah, and that's what actually one should talk more about, and it's a very nice question. But I don't know, I thought like explaining this thing is also very important. But as I said, I see this, some scope that what Ambedkar, talk, when he, took this decision of and creating your own culture, which not necessarily, will be looked as a stigma. For example, but although upper caste, as what Bourdieu who say that what is the cultural capital, specifically the embodied kind of cultural capital, it's also the mannerism, or what we can say the attitudes or the attributes. Okay, so upper caste have this cultural capital. Why? Because they have some kind of attribute. And what is that attribute? That attribute is basically also to create a stigma for us. Okay, so now the blue color is also stigma. Sometimes Dalit Panther wanted to use this word Dalit for everyone. Upper caste use Dalit as a concept to stigma. Okay, right. So Brahmin has this, but what Ambedkar said that now, therefore, you don't bother about them, you create your own world. And therefore Buddhism becomes very important, the symbol, and he takes us to the past, where he claims that you are not new Buddhist. Maybe constitutionally you will be called new Buddhist, but you were earlier Buddhist. And it's very important to note the Ambedkar last, after his conversion, there was a talk that why he was converting, why he chose Nagpur as a place to convert. And he gives a very nice answer that he sees that this land belongs to Nag people who were earlier Buddhist. Okay, yeah. And therefore he takes us to the past glory that भाई तुम्हारा इतिहास केवल मार खाने का नहीं है. You have a इतिहास of कि आपने पेशवा को ही मारा है. So so he brings these symbols of that you have that glory of past. You have a glory of that you have a past to claim Buddha, who is uncontested figure in the world history, जिसको कोई contest नहीं कर सकता बुद्धा और उसके knowledge को. You have that one, and therefore you create this symbol. So I believe that although many sociologists and the upper caste political scientists after Ambedkar conversion, they started studying that what happened. and they started saying, "Arey, dekho, ye log to half Buddhist, half Hindu hai." By studying some poor families who do not have access to education, who have been told कि टीका लगाने से आप बड़े बनते हो या आपको मिलता, उन लोगों को स्टडी करके उन्होंने बोला कि चलो अम्बेडकर का कन्वर्जन का प्रोजेक्ट फेल्ड है. बट व्हेन आई गो, बिकॉज आई कम फ्रॉम दैट एरिया, as Bordeaux comes from very much एक working family से, we many of us, my friend, and maybe some of them even in this discussions are there. We come from the area where we are seeing, witnessing these changes, the changes of नाम changes से लेके हमारे नामकरण के changes से लेके, most of the things are, creating a new cultural significance for us. Like I can tell you from my experience that many of my friends who जो अभी उतने पढ़े लिखे नहीं होंगे, I don't see this cultural inferiority in them. I don't see, rather I find them more assertive, that they don't bother that where they're standing, with whom they're standing. But they say Jai Bhim or they say Namo Buddhaya very clearly than the people who are in the university, standing with some Brahmins or in the flight or in the train, they say, oh, Jai Bhim, or they try to escape it. I guess, therefore, that this world that Ambedkar wanted to create, this new world, that is very important. That is creating this cultural capital. This Ambedkar's idea of Buddhism, own cultural significance. This हमारे घर को हम अशोक चक्र लगाते हैं. These are not small things. These are very very important things. हम लोग स्वास्तिक नहीं लग, वो उनकी तरह उसको ये नहीं कर रहे हैं, सत्यनारायण की पूजा नहीं कर रहे. Some can say, तुम लोग सत्यनारायण की पूजा नहीं करते हो, लेकिन भिक्खु को लाते हो पूजा करने के लिए. Is good only. This is a new cultural capital that we are creating. We should focus more on creating our own Buddha Viharas. We should focus more on our people converting into Buddhism. I believe that is the way to creating cultural capital.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So there's another question in the chat by Asim. It says, Jai Bhim Rahul Bhai, very illuminating talk. Thank you. Would you think of exercising cultural capital through classical arts, literature, and films by Brahmins and other Savarnas? Also, its effect on alienating Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi students in university campus.
No, that is there. University itself, is a part of exclusion. So उसमें तो क्या है, वो तो और, the more the Brahmin brings their so-called culture, more exclusion you see. But as far as the classical culture is concerned, Brahmin doesn't have a classical culture. And that part I forgot. Now I was also reading one paper where the author is claiming that how, for example, this classical so-called South Indian music or the Kannadi dance or the music, where basically the practices of the lower caste, working class communities, later on Brahmin appropriated. And this is also the question, traditional question, which the historian, sociologists, and anthropologists should ask before they proceed to understand caste, that how can the group of people who do not believe in work, who do not believe in creating something, can create the culture. Okay. So most of these practices of dance, form, and many other practices, they have appropriated with the passage of time. Okay. But yes, now this appropriation itself has become the part of the cultural capital, which they try to use and they try to exhibit in the university. I also believe that as Ambedkar believed in reinvestigating the history, unlike the Indian historians who has not produced much for the marginalized classes in this country, I guess taking Ambedkar legacy, we also reinvestigate our past, where we should find our roots. Our roots cannot be simply associated with the recent past. Our root must be very long. But whenever we talk about the classical history or the classical past, we generally talk about the Vedic past, which Ambedkar also contests that there is no proof of this such kind of glorious Vedic past, if you read Ambedkar very closely. Okay, so rather he believes that we had a classical past where we were earlier Buddhist. Okay, and many other people go in again very long. So I believe that without having any a shame or some guilt or whatever they say, marginalized students within the university should more should be busy in reinvestigating their past, creating their own history, creating own knowledge, and also contesting the methodological aspect that the universities follows, and to contest that. I know one person in JNU who did not follow that methodology. He was not awarded the PhD also. So so I believe that the university, see, I don't know again how much reform one can bring in the university, I don't know, but at least university educated graduate people from marginalized group, they should rather producing uh, the knowledge according to so-called academia and according to their guidelines. We should produce our independent knowledge. That is very, very important, I believe.
Thank you, sir. Asha, do you want to go next?
Yeah, JBM everyone. This is Asha. I'm from Hyderabad. It's you. Bodhio himself says this certificates, educational certificate as a tool to break this cultural cap, the notion of cultural capital. So, how far it is applicable in Indian context?
It is very much applicable. IIT degree, how many Brahmins and how many Dalits get the IIT degree? How many Dalits get pass out from the central university? Very few. That's why you see this entire emergence of subaltern school. A very contradictory subaltern school was emerged by the Indian Brahmins, and they got degrees and they got no jobs in the Cambridge and other places. This is the use of degree. This is how they have used the certificate. Bordi was very much right, and therefore I see that the Brahmins, if anyone, if wants to understand the cultural capital, wants to study directly with the Brahmins, rather placing the Indian ruling class in a very ambiguous manner. Those who are the ruling party is the ruling class. No, the India, the Brahmin and the upper caste are ruling class, no matter which party is in the power. And they have used this certificate. And when Ambedkar was invited by Maratha Mandir to tell them what could be their the future ways to enhance their condition. Ambedkar, I guess it's in the volume 17 part 2, around page number 70-75. You should read Ambedkar where he's saying he's referring Brahmin as a minority of a ruling class. Saying you should see that how Brahmin has used the education for their own development. I think certificates and all the certificates means degrees and this so-called education produces so-called what Bordi would call or other people would call high kind of culture. Right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I'll call Hingam to give sir a vote of thanks.
Jai Bhim everyone, I'm Hingam from School of Social Justice and Governments, which is TTSA. On behalf of the Ambedkarite Student Association Test, I would like to thank our prestigious speaker, Rahul sir, for being there and speaking about cultural capital and caste. I would also like to thank everyone who's here listening, asking questions, being interactive. Through this session, I'd like to point some of the issues that would need to be highlighted. The first is the institutionalization of cultural capital. Rahul sir spoke about how caste is not about Dalits, but about Brahmins. He also spoke about Brahminization, and Brahminization is all about Brahmin. He also speak about the certain community in Punjab that owns the land. So I would like to urge to all the participants to see through a caste conscious lens on farmers' protest as well. Also, Rahul sir spoke about some comedians who are thought to be very woke and liberal. For me, I'm just pointing out the name which is on air. He's Veer Das. His idea of India and our idea of India as a minority, as someone who comes from a Bahujan Samaj, is very different. He speaks about a different India. We have a different India. We have an India where no one dare to question about racism that we face in Northeast or casteism that we face in general. Sir also speak about the hegemony in academia, which is even more than that of politics. So I was going through Rahul sir's profile. He has fought election in JNU. He was the first runner-up. So JNU, as I was going through it, JNU doesn't have any Dalit. There's just one. As far as my research is there, there's just one Bahujan, the OBC Geeta Kumari, president in JNU as well. So not taking further time, I would just like to. We are the ASS grateful to Rahul sir for his presence in commemorating the Mahaparinivaran Divas, ending my vote of thanks with a poem by a research scholar, Avek Khaka. I'm not your data, nor am I your vote bank. I'm not your project or any exotic museum object. I'm not your soul waiting to be harvested, nor am I the lab where theories are tested. I refuse, reject, resist your labels. Jai Bhim, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in the session.
It was last minute. I'll just take and say, see, Abhay was my senior, and it's very sad that we don't have him anymore. He was a brilliant academician. The only one message that I want to go to ASA, because since I was a part of TIS and I know how it's difficult, I can say only one thing. See, because I've been the part of university and the university culture. I can tell you one thing: many people will come to your organization, and mostly this from Dalits or other marginalized background, upper middle class people. They will come with the so-called this new Western academic category and will try to stigmatize your organization. Never let it down. Always, keep the spirit of ASA, and do not bother about this upper middle class Dalit who come and wants to defame your organization. Because this was, I have been, because the research that I am also, doing for my PhD is also include student movement and student organization. This one thing is quite common that I see, and therefore my all best wishes to ASA that in future they will keep going and keep doing good work. Thank you very much, and Jai Bhim to all.
Thank you, sir. Jai Bhim.
Yep.